Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we're ready to kick off. So I'll begin with an introduction to myself. I'm Alan Barrett. I'm the director of the ESRI, and it's a great pleasure to welcome everybody to this morning's webinar on blockchain skills. So I have to say, I'm one of those people who is coming along today in the expectation that I'm going to learn an awful lot, partly about the technology itself. I normally find myself chairing ESRI events where I have a reasonable degree of background knowledge on the topic that's being discussed. But today is one of those occasions where I have to say I honestly think I know remarkably little. So it's going to be a great opportunity for me to learn, and so I'm very much looking forward to it. It's quite an exciting topic for the Institute. I think collectively, and this may have been a little bit more before the pandemic, we have been talking an awful lot in the Institute and across across the country and the wider world about the sort of issues around the future of work. And sort of technological developments and new jobs and sort of job creation, job destruction, all these sort of issues. And this was obviously of great interest to a research institute such as ourselves. So it was great while we were doing a certain amount of talking about it and thinking about it. It's great to be actually doing some research on these sort of frontier technologies and the skills that are associated with them. Another issue sort of that's been a great interest to me, as I was a labour economist before I was director of the Institute, but that great challenge for education and training systems. How do you anticipate what are going to be the demands of the future, and how do you orientate your skill delivery systems in such a way that you can actually sort of feed into the emerging demands? So that's again been just one of those issues we've been sort of thinking about and grappling with for a very, very long time. And under this project, again, it's great that we're having an opportunity to think and actively engage in these sort of issues. Yet another part of the sort of the landscape behind this project that makes it very exciting is that this is part of a European collaboration. And again, for many, many years in the Institute, and all the researchers on the call will know this, the best research is always done when you're working with the best people across Europe in a very sort of international context. And so the ESRI has always been eager that we had a sort of a strong European strand in the work, a strong strand of collaboration with European partners. And again, the work that's going to be discussed today is very much out of that stable. And indeed, we'll have somebody from the European level project coordinators who will talk a bit later on. So we've got quite a busy morning, quite a number of presentations. We will have a little bit of time at the end for some questions and answers. So in that context, I'm going to encourage people, maybe as the sort of morning progresses, that if you submit the questions through the Q&A function, which you should also feel free to talk in the chat function. Again, I think we've discovered over the pandemic that it is possible to have a good lively chat in that function. So if people would like to do that, to share views and observations, hopefully that will contribute to the overall sort of level of engagement throughout the morning. So again, chat away in the chat function and then questions in the Q&A function, and hopefully we'll get to some of them towards the end of the event. So with that, I'm going to start calling on the speakers, and I'm delighted to say that our opening address this morning is going to be provided by William Beausang. So William is an Assistant Secretary in the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. I don't know if he remembers this. I first met William about 20 years ago when he was in the Department of Health. After that, I think he was in Public Expenditure and Reform, has also spent time in the Department of Education, but he's now found himself in Ireland's newest department, Further and Higher Education. So we're delighted that William has been able to come along this morning to give us the view from the new department. And with that, William, I'll hand over to you and ask you to provide your opening remarks.
Thanks, Alan. If you recall, we worked on long-term issues, and as economists, we'll also recall what was said about what happens in the long term. But good morning, everyone, and really grateful for the opportunity, for the invitation to open today's proceedings. As Alan said, I'm in the Department of Further and Higher Education here in Dublin, Head of Skills. So the issue that we're talking about today, the research we're talking about today, is really important in help shape policy response to what's clearly a really important issue for the future world of work and for society. And I think the analysis has been presented today on both the demand for and supply of blockchain skills across Europe has a real value in helping us to better understand how we can support, enable progress in meeting the objectives for the EU to be, as it set itself, a leader in blockchain technology, an innovator in blockchain, and home to significant platforms, applications, and companies. And these objectives obviously align with Ireland's national ambition, as reflected in the Blockchain Ireland Group's recent strategy that I'm sure Professor Joyce O'Connor will be talking about later. I'm sure it's the case that many of you attending today, alongside participants in the consortium, have helped guide and advise the research which has been presented and discussed today. And I mean, this engagement and outreach from my exposure to the research has really enhanced the value and benefit of the work by ensuring it's informed by the knowledge and experience of expert stakeholders. You may know that today's event coincides with Ireland's Blockchain Week, which was launched by the Minister for Finance here on Monday. And it was tagged as building momentum and creating opportunities in blockchain technology across the island of Ireland. And our Minister Donoghue, highlighted in a tweet, looking at his account following Monday's event, that when the first Blockchain Ireland event in 2019 happened, it wasn't that long ago, there were 50 companies in Ireland working with blockchain, now close to 150. And I think that simple metric, a threefold increase, emphasizes the necessity for and the value of planning for the future skills and workforce requirements for blockchain. The Minister himself said, I think that as the technology develops at a rapid pace, and we can't see these changes pass us by. And I think it's important maybe at the outset, when you're talking about a skills forecasting exercise, to establish some kind of a baseline for ourselves where we stand in terms of the broader adoption of technology. And as an overview, and from a Google search over the last couple of days, a good starting point for me was the OECD report, actually published just 25th of May last, a Blockchain at the Frontier, which considers specific aspects of the technology's impact in strengthening international economic linkages. And the report reaffirms what I think we all know, but are anxious to find out more about, that blockchain is a game-changing technology that could one day transform businesses, markets, and even our social lives. OECD is very clear in that work that policymakers should be paying close attention to the technology implications for public policy objectives, as together with other emerging technologies, it's expected to drive new levels of digital transformation, disruption that we think about a lot. So as set out in the OECD report, there are sectors clearly like finance where technology use is well advanced and its disruptive potential is demonstrated. I mean, just as an anecdote, just searching the FT website on blockchain, just a series of articles about what's happening there, and just sort of seeing blockchain as purely sort of related to cryptocurrencies, which obviously isn't the case. In other areas, as the OECD said, while blockchain innovations are beginning to emerge in a broad variety of settings, and the pace of innovation can be high, the OECD do say that they are considerably less scaled and its potential impacts can appear more marginal and remote. So I think that's an interesting discussion point for later on. Because building a skilled workforce for blockchain, utilizing the analysis that we're going to be hearing about today and forecasting, can clearly drive the adoption and innovation in the use of technology that will accelerate and intensify the realization of its full potential. So it really highlights how timely the research program we're talking about this morning by the consortium, which is well into its stride as we hear as we go through the morning. In fact, I mean, the recent Blockchain Ireland strategy I mentioned previously highlights the need for enhanced talent and skill programs that can position Ireland as an international blockchain hub. And I'm going to talk just briefly about a number of important strands of our national approach to meeting priority skill needs, in particular those arising in relation to new technologies which are kind of relevant to that discussion. Obviously, we have a national digital strategy published earlier this year, which stressed the need for more and diverse pathways in both higher education and further education and training, including things like the development of targeted short cycle tertiary programs, a delivery of more flexible modular programs in HE, and of course the further development of micro-credentials, which will be crucial. And this kind of new model of provision is an important element of the reform process that is underway in higher education, implementing the new funding model for the sector announced by Minister for Further and Higher Education earlier this month. It's also integral to the government's plans here for a more unified tertiary education system, further education, higher education, the research system announced last week, which sees those elements of tertiary working together to create joint third level programs, sees higher education institutions ring fencing more places for students from further education, and also then increasing the availability of part-time and an online program and skills priorities in both higher education and FET. I suppose echoing what Alan said, a finding of the ESRI research that resonated particularly strongly with me is that most people don't know what blockchain or distributed ledger technology is. So we're all on a learning journey. But this clearly has the potential to act as a constraint on the adoption and use of the technology, and the industry, the public's, and indeed policymakers' appetite to engage with the obvious opportunities it presents. Blockchain Ireland, and I refer to the recent strategy document, highlighted that successful blockchain adoption requires broad acceptance of that technology. And that obviously is in turn dependent on creating greater public trust in blockchain by ensuring there is awareness of blockchain's value and impact for good, for business, for consumers, for the economy, and for society. It's also critical to priming and promoting demand by individuals for developing relevant blockchain relevant skills. And I mean, there are already good practice examples here in Ireland of significant agility and flexibility by the higher education system in providing specialist programs in the area. I mean, the industry-led MSc in blockchain, developed by Technology Ireland's ICT SkillNet in collaboration with, and now delivered by Dublin's City University, is a great example of that. But as we know, supply does not bring forward its own demand. And I was looking at a recent report from Burning Glass, the job markets analytics company in the States, which talked about around 2/3 of existing digital workers in the US possessing high in-demand tech skills such as AI, machine learning, cloud, IT automations, and cybersecurity, moving into their current role from a different occupation. So I think an important question for us is how we can draw on that type of workforce to meet skill needs for emerging technologies and blockchain as the pace of adoption accelerates. And building that talent base required to support Ireland and indeed Europe's ambition blockchain and in other emerging technologies will on that basis require the development of significantly greater knowledge and awareness across relevant parts of the labour force of the accessibility of the employment opportunities that are there, the distinct roles and specific skill sets that are in demand, and the kind of skills, experience, and expertise derived and developed in other roles and occupations, which, when complemented by focus and targeted reskilling and upskilling, can provide pathways into working in high growth emerging technology sector in demand roles. And the great thing about this research, these are all elements which the research casts light on and helps us understand that kind of important structural change in the labour market and the workforce. So in conclusion, there's also the crucial point I just want to make, that the research on the historical experience of the adoption of new technologies points firmly to the fact that it's only through the development of a skilled workforce that the full potential of new technologies is eventually realized. I mean, obviously innovation happens at the intersection of skilled and talented people and technology. And as we've seen on many occasions, it's the adopters and adapters of technology that create much of its value through innovation. So the skills forecasting that we'll be hearing more about today really will help our understanding of how we build a workforce for blockchain, through which this innovation happens and the value from the technology can better be achieved. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing the presentations and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that, William. Great to see the department's interest and interesting to hear your reflections. And I'm sure we'll be talking to the department again, both about the specific project here and then the broader issues. So with that, we've been talking about the research, but now we're going to get a little bit more into the details. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Dionysios Solomos, who is the head of program with the Erasmus CHAISE program. And title of Dionysios' talk, Sectoral Approach to Blockchain Skills Development, Project Overview, Key Findings and Expected Results. So pleasure to welcome you to the ESRI, even in this virtual way, and we look forward to your talk.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the warm welcome and the invitation from the ESRI to be here today. It's a big pleasure for me and honor to present the CHAISE project in front of you. I think we need first to share the presentation. Okay, thank you very much. And move to the next slide. Before talking about the CHAISE project, I would like to share with you a few words about the blockchain technology to make sure that all the participants have at least a basic understanding of what this new technology is about. So blockchain is a computing innovation that is disrupting industries and the public sector, driving economic change by reducing the cost of transactions and the time lapse of working through intermediaries. From a technical point of view, blockchain comprises distributed databases that maintain a growing list of order records that cannot be altered retroactively, providing a secure ledger for storing transactions and enabling more efficient asset transfers and ownership verification. The transfer assets can be tangible, like house, car, cash, and land, or intangible, like patents, copyrights, and branding. Blockchain has a wide transformative potential and can be applied to a wide range of sectors, way beyond cryptocurrencies, such as health, agriculture, transportation, public services, and education. Next slide, please. Apart from its transformative potential, which has been widely recognized and embraced by industry and policy actors, the blockchain technology has now reached a turning point as the momentum shifts from the exploration of technological frontiers and possible use cases towards building applications and their wide utilization in different economic and social instances. For this reason, the European Union has placed blockchain at the core of its strategy to advance digital transformation, benefiting society and businesses and stimulating sustainable growth. The European blockchain sector, with its existing infrastructure in innovative SMEs, is well placed to acquire global leadership. Still, its competitiveness largely relies on the availability of a competent and versatile workforce. While the demand for blockchain skills is steadily increasing, employers are facing a shortfall of skilled professionals that prevents the sector from unleashing its full potential. Notably, the job site LinkedIn ranks blockchain as the #1 tech skill sought after by European companies, reporting a 400% growth in 2021 compared to the previous year. Next, please. Further to talent shortage, the sector is also challenged by global competitive pressures, limited connection between the education and the market, and low responsiveness of formal education to new workplace requirements. What is more, there are different types and volumes of skill mismatching among European Union member states. Skills requirements for blockchain occupational tasks are not standardized, and blockchain is regarded as a subject of ICT specialization, mostly offered at the highest educational level. Fueled by this misconception, VET provision appears quite slow in scaling up existing training offerings related to blockchain to the degree needed by the European economy. Next. CHAISE was created as a response to the European Commission's call under the Erasmus program for a strategic approach for a blueprint on blockchain skills development so as to complement and reinforce its blockchain growth strategy to acquire global leadership. CHAISE is a sector skill alliance with a mission to build an effective industry-led governance system and skill strategy to respond to the current and future skill needs of the European blockchain workforce and deliver appropriate and future-proof training solutions and qualifications. In terms of impact, CHAISE aspires to have a systematic sector-wide impact going beyond the project lifecycle and its partners, addressing the needs of learners and workers, education and training providers, businesses, social partners, and educational authorities. Next. The CHAISE partnership gathers 23 partners from 13 European countries. The alliance consists of leading ICT companies like Fujitsu and Microsoft, key institutional players like INADVA, European umbrella organizations like Digital Europe, social partners, thematically focused education and training providers, and public authorities with a regulatory function in education and training. Next slide. As a strategic initiative for blockchain skill development, CHAISE seeks to achieve a large number of multifaceted objectives, which can be clustered into three interrelated areas. The first one is cooperation. The aims under this pillar are to set up a collaborative method for monitoring workplace and skill needs, to set up a post-project permanent blockchain cooperation network, provide a mechanism for collaboration at national level, and survey and promote blockchain vet offerings to practitioners. Skills intelligence and training objectives: to improve blockchain skills intelligence and document skill mismatches, design a modular vet program and educational resources, introduce a massive open online course which can act as a wide access delivery method for the CHAISE curriculum, and establish a sectoral qualification linked to the European recognition tools. Recognition and mobility objectives include to define EU-wide occupational requirements for the blockchain workforce, to link the curriculum with the European recognition tools, and connect job seekers and blockchain companies. Next. In relation now with the defined objectives described, the expected outcomes of the project include to perform a detailed skill needs and mismatches analysis, a quantitative forecasting model, an institutionally validated European blockchain skill strategy, a 5-semester VET program, open educational resources and instructional materials for blockchain training, a massive open online course, and the delivery of training to at least 700 individuals. What is more, the project expects to create 3 new blockchain-specific occupational profiles to be embedded primarily in the ESCO classification system and the classification system of our partner ECQA, a blueprint and roadmap for the establishment of a blockchain specialization qualification, a dedicated blockchain career guidance and advocacy platform, and a memorandum of cooperation to scale up the alliance towards creating a European blockchain skill cooperation network. Next. Now, let's take a look into the results of the first year of project implementation. Next slide. During the first year, the partnership implemented a comprehensive needs analysis, first time employed for the European blockchain sector. This process comprised a combination of research activities and wide consultation with EU and national actors and sector representatives to define blockchain skills requirements and mismatches at the European level. Relevant activities included the collection of labor market statistics from official databases, the implementation of an EU-wide survey on skill needs and work realities, the analysis of online job advertisements, and the reviewing of existing training programs. Next slide. The results from this analysis helped the partnership to define the characteristics of the European blockchain market and demarcate it from the wider ICT sector. The blockchain market, very briefly, is dominated by technological startups with high R&D activities and new application development. At the same time, however, there is an increased number of businesses across sectors and disciplines which act as adopters of those services, aiming to achieve increased operational efficiency. The ICT sector is found to be the largest employer for blockchain professionals, accounting for over half of all job advertisements. Other blockchain-intensive economic activities and industries are financial services and gaming. It can be also observed a steady increase in investments in sectors such as communication, retail, real estate, supply chain management, as well as energy, research, and education. Finally, the vast majority of emerging blockchain jobs can be concentrated in three detailed occupational categories: software and application developers, ICT service managers, and business and administration managers. Next slide. As regards now the characteristics of the European blockchain workforce, the sector is overwhelmed by male workers. 4 out of 5 blockchain workers are men holding a bachelor degree from an ICT field of study. Blockchain positions are mostly covered by professionals aged between 26 and 37, a relatively young workforce with low previous working experience. The average wage is estimated to 45,000 euros, and the great majority works under a full-time employment contract. Next. Okay. The evidence drawn from labor market analysis showed the emergence of 3 new roles in the blockchain field, namely the blockchain developer, the blockchain architect, and the blockchain manager, each profile coming with a different mixed combination of skills and knowledge requirements. The role of the blockchain developer includes to code and develop applications within an agile environment. Therefore, the blockchain developer needs strong technical skills like coding, front and back-end development, complemented with marketing and finance skills and transversal capacities, which are required to be able to interact with clients and work as a member of a project team. The role of blockchain architect includes the conceptualization of use cases and the design of application architecture, guiding developers and ensuring the coherence of all technical aspects of a project as an integrated system. A blockchain architect needs, apart from technical knowledge and familiarity with programming languages and coding work, advanced leadership, innovation, creativity, and problem-solving skills. Finally, the blockchain manager, mostly acting as a project manager responsible to interact with clients, maintain close cooperation with business manager and marketing professional, needs advanced business skills, advanced managerial skills such as business and change management, needs analysis, legal compliance, risk management, and communication. What can be derived from this analysis is that the transversal skills, known also as soft skills, are rising in importance for all roles, from developer to manager, while industry and sector-specific knowledge is also becoming increasingly important for the development of tailored to businesses' needs blockchain applications. Next slide. In March, the Alliance published its strategy to advance blockchain skills development in Europe. The strategy, prepared by NATWA and validated by 53 industry actors from across Europe, including representatives from DG Education and the European Blockchain Partnership, sets the framework conditions for sectoral cooperation and outlines the priorities and actions to address the prevailing skill shortages in the European labour market. 5 areas for actions have been identified and are prescribed in details in this strategy. Next slide, please. The first one is monitoring blockchain labour market development and the evolving skill needs, the creation of an EU-wide blockchain knowledge building platform, enhancing collaboration and knowledge transfer from businesses to academia and vice versa, create a decentralized blockchain training and marketplace platform and bring blockchain to everyone. Next slide. As part of this strategy, the partnership has also set up a collaborative method for the anticipation of the blockchain future skill demand and supply, mainly to act as an early warning information mechanism to mitigate possible labor market imbalances and support educational actors and labor market actors in making evidence-based decisions. The ESRI has developed a novel dynamic methodological framework for forecasting the demand across European countries and matching this against the educational supply. The model works as a function of macro environment and sector-specific variables and is based on a time series analysis of relevant parameters. Let's see now very briefly how this model works. Next slide, please. Given the fact that blockchain statistics do not exist at a large extent across the European countries, the demand for blockchain professional can be estimated by scrapping a blockchain-related job from job site and mapping them to specific ISCO occupational categories and calculating the share of ISCO categories that can be considered to be blockchain jobs. Once we have identified the relevant blockchain occupations, the demand can be then forecasted using CEDEFOP occupational and deployment forecast on macro environment and sectoral trend for each occupational category. Similarly, the blockchain skill supply could be estimated by identifying the number of graduates from relevant educational courses. However, given the fact that accurate and reliable information on the number of graduates from blockchain courses is not available, the model estimates the supply as a proxy of blockchain graduates from total graduate in blockchain-related fields of study under the umbrella of ICT programs. The mechanism produces forecasts for a 5-year time period using linear trends sourced from the previous period Eurostat data. More details on the frameworks, architecture, and its technicalities will be provided by the ESRI in the next session. Next slide. Next, please. The forecasting results for the period 2026 indicate a shortage of blockchain professionals, which results from the low number of expected graduates as compared to the future needs of the market. The gap is estimated to around 15,000 positions across the European countries. Next slide. Finally, I will conclude this session with the project milestones and upcoming tasks. We have already discussed about the labor market analysis, the skill strategy, and the forecasting model. Currently, the partnership has been working on the creation of the CHAISE curriculum and all the associated educational and instructional resources. This curriculum and all the training package is expected to be available in November 2022. The next task includes the creation of blockchain occupational profiles and their integration into the ESCO classification system, the deployment of a career guidance platform to connect job seekers and blockchain employers, and the establishment of a national blockchain skills partnership to facilitate the rollout of project results and the implementation of the strategy at national level. Finally, the overriding objective of the CHAISE Alliance is to acquire a long-lasting effect. And for this reason, efforts have been already initiated towards establishing a permanent blockchain skills cooperation network. That's all from me. Thanks for listening and apologies for my Greek accent. For more information about the project, you can visit our website and social media pages. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dionysios. Fascinating talk, and it prompted an awful lot of questions, some of which we'll probably come to later in the morning. But I was reminded for many years the ESRI ran a project which was originally called manpower forecasting. That probably shows how old it was, but it was part of that sort of general effort to take macroeconomic projections at a certain point, and then to try and sort of disaggregate that by industrial level and likewise by occupational level. And obviously something similar is being done here. And the effort was more or less successful at various stages. But it's just interesting to see sort of renewed thinking about those sort of models. But anyway, as I said, hopefully we'll learn more. And I know you'll be sticking with us anyway, so you might pick up on some of the questions later on as well. But anyway, thanks so much for that. Really enjoyed it. So with that, we're going to go to our next speaker, as my colleague Adele Whelan, and Adele is going to talk about blockchain skills in Ireland and the UK. So over to you, Adele.
So as Alan said, my name is Adele Whelan and I'm a researcher at the ESRI. And my presentation today is focusing on blockchain skills in Ireland and the UK. So this part of the research was funded by the Digit Centre at the University of Sussex. So we're grateful for their input on this. Dionysios has spoken a lot about the CHAISE project, and the CHAISE project has a European focus. But we felt that it was important to also look a little bit more in depth at the Irish scenario and our nearest neighbour, the UK, to see what was happening there in terms of blockchain skills. So the ESRI team who have worked on this project to date is Seamus McGuinness, Paul Redmond and Clav Sipicus. I also want to say a special thanks to Abian, who was with us at the ESRI but is now at the European Commission, and Nachi and Will at the Digit Centre at the University of Sussex, who also provided support for this work. So why are we interested in examining blockchain and its impact on the labour market? Well, the speakers before me today have outlined the importance of blockchain technology and how that's changing the landscape of many different industries and sectors. So it is a growing, emerging technology, and there's an emerging skill set associated with that. But as economists at the ESRI, we are very interested in examining all emerging technologies and how they impact the labour market. So we're interested in how they impact the demand and supply of skills and how they're changing. Now, what I've shown on this slide here is Google Trends. So this shows us the interest in a key search term within Google, and it ranges from 2004 right up until the present day. You can see there was no search terms included blockchain previous to 2013. So we're really looking at what has happened since 2013 within this space, so post 2013 timeframe. Dionysios has somewhat summarized this, but in order to look at mismatch, we firstly need to look at demand and then we need to look at supply. When we started to look at what are the blockchain occupations, it wasn't easy to identify who was a blockchain worker within the normal categories. So ISCO here stands for the standardized classification of occupations. It wasn't possible to identify blockchain workers very easily. So we started by scraping LinkedIn job adverts. So what this allowed us to do was, in LinkedIn, any job advert that mentioned the word blockchain, either in the title or the job description, to take all of the information associated with that job, the employer, the skills required, the location of the job, all of the details associated with that, and create a database with that information. So we did this for Ireland and the UK. Then we looked more closely at the job titles, and we were able to match those into the ISCO framework, so the standard classification of occupations. And that opens up a lot more doors to us in order to look at how this is changing over time or how we expect it to change. So we estimated the share of these occupations that were blockchain related. For instance, if we're looking at software developers, how many software developer advertisements were looking specifically for blockchain software developers? And is that 10%, was that 5% of all? And the scrape data allows us to do that. We also had consultations with industry experts, which is a very important part of the process to feed in the information that we needed. In terms of supply then, to look at mismatch, we also had to look at the supply. Dionysios said that we don't have a defined number of blockchain graduates. So this was particularly difficult to get specific courses. What we were able to look at was blockchain relevant courses in ICT and computer science. And in Ireland, it's a smaller country, so we were able to identify 10, 11 specific courses that had become available over more recent years. We had a further look at the course types in the area, and we estimated the share of graduates that are from blockchain specific courses. Again, further consultation with industry experts, both within Ireland and the UK. And part of the reason for having this conference today is to share the findings and the information with individuals who have been so giving of their time, whether that's through surveys, individual interviews, or who participated in the consultation process, which we're very grateful for. It's improved the research significantly. The way I've presented my results today is really 10 key findings. What did we learn from the research to date when we looked at it? Many people are not familiar with blockchain. So blockchain is a distributed ledger technology, and awareness and acceptance of the technology is key in terms of progression forward. It's a shared immutable ledger, so cannot be changed. It facilitates transactions or recording of transactions of assets in a business network. Okay, it's accepted internationally. We've heard of publications and strategies of focus from the European Commission, the OECD, both UK and Irish governments also saying that it is an important technology, emerging technology. The global blockchain market is predicted to grow depending on which article you read or where you look. I picked the one that says 7 billion to over 160 billion by 2029. But they all predict exponential growth. The second point is we are aware of shortages of ICT graduates in particular regions, particular areas of skill sets. So if you think of software developers, if you blend software developers with blockchain as a specialization, the software developers are already scarce or rare. So this combination of skills makes them even more rare currently. And given that the supply of courses is responding to this need as well, it takes some time. The next points relating to the demand is, as a total share of jobs advertised, blockchain jobs are really a small component in both the UK, Ireland, and even Europe as a whole. They're about 1%. So the number of jobs that mention blockchain is about 1% of all jobs advertised currently. The core occupations, when we matched to the standardized classification, are software developers, systems analysts, and ICT service managers. They were the key ones. Of those three occupations, it made up about 80% of all the jobs that were advertised in Ireland and the UK. So as a share of occupations, the blockchain jobs that we expect to play a role into the future and grow would be blockchain developers, blockchain architects, and blockchain managers, as Dionysios has also said. When we looked at the adverts, most jobs were advertised as full-time positions, and the job occupations are all professional. Many of the people working in the industry have high levels of educational attainment. But one thing we noticed was that over 40% of jobs did not specify a minimum educational requirement. But from speaking to recruitment specialists with a specialization within fintech and blockchain, it said that this was really because of difficulties in recruitment. So in order to encourage people to apply for the positions, they didn't specify a minimum educational level. So there was an importance of basic skills. So that would be programming skills, web development, but also an eagerness to learn was seen as very important. But as blockchain develops into other sectors and industries, it is felt that this increasing in specialization will be required due to technological progress. We will need to have more specialized individuals in key industries and areas across a larger, more diverse application areas. So this table here gives you an idea of the information that's now available to us. So at one point in time in November 2021, and of course this can be replicated at any time point, I just presented this, we were able to scrape the blockchain jobs from LinkedIn. You'll see here Ireland midway along the table here. So it's about 1% of jobs in Ireland had mentioned blockchain. For the UK, it was about 0.3%, so it was lower in the UK. And over all of the countries, it was about 0.34 also. When we looked at the distribution of these jobs across the ISCO categories, as I've said, the majority were really software developers and analysts. That's true for Ireland at 48%, the UK 53%, and the EU 27%, a little bit higher at 58%. The next biggest categories were managers, really ICT managers and business service administration managers. So those combined make up over 20% for each of the categories. And then smaller proportions were database and network professionals and legal professionals as well. Then there's a wide, vast range of categories that also had mentions of blockchain, and they're about 5 to 10% outside of that. But we're really capturing about 80% of the jobs within these ISCO categories linked here. So what are the skills that are required? Every advert, almost 50% of adverts picked had included one of these technical, one of these business, and one of these transversal. But really is a mix of technical, business, and transversal skills that are required. You can see that 67% of adverts mentioned coding, 51% design, and then network, back-end, front-end engineering, and Bitcoin were mentioned as well as technical skills. For business, product development was important, management development, design, finance, compliance, and marketing also. So you can see as the industry and expands, there are more skills and different occupations required. So for instance, marketing, HR, people with not maybe technical skills of coding, but that understand blockchain and can work within this industry. Transversal skills then were team working, communication, responsibility, and self-efficacy. The importance of communication cannot be underestimated here. It's quite a difficult technology. Awareness and acceptance are key. So it's important that we have people with the technical skills that can also communicate very well how this technology can be used to solve problems, whether that be for private industry or public entities as well. And three key findings for the supply. When we looked at the share of total graduates in Ireland and even ICT graduates, blockchain graduates are a very small component in both the UK, Ireland, and that also holds true for Europe. In Ireland, there's a range of courses, about 11 courses currently, from certificate right up to master's level. William mentioned earlier the master's, that's a combined effort between DCU and SkillsNet within Ireland. But the total number of computer science courses in 2020 was about 240 courses. So that gives you an idea. 11 of those 240 have blockchain specific components, approximately, so that's 4%. So it is quite small as a total of total graduates. So the total number of ICT and computer science graduates, however, have been growing in recent years. In fact, have been growing significantly within Ireland over recent years. Now, I'll show a table on this in a minute. As a share of ICT graduates, what we have seen is general courses. We've seen declining shares in general courses and students opting for more specific courses. So whether that's software and applications development, analysis, AI, gaming, So more specific courses, and we've seen differences in the shares there. However, as I've said, specific training programs and courses in blockchain, although they are available, there's a small number of them and their uptake is slow at the moment, but growing. And it takes time for individuals who enroll in a course, obviously, to become available on the labour markets, depending on the length of time of the course. So if we look at ICT graduates here, and this information is from Eurostat, I've presented it for Ireland, UK, and the EU countries also. You can see for Ireland in 2014, we had about 3,000 ICT graduates, but that has grown. In 2019, it was over 6,000. So this is a 100% increase over this 5-year academic period, which is very, very high. In the UK, we've had a growth from 25,000 to 28,000, growth of 13%. In EU and other EU countries, higher than the UK, but nowhere near the growth rate of Ireland. So some people might say a good software engineer is a good blockchain software engineer, so that they can be trained on the job or trained more specifically in the skills that are required. But there is an investment that's needed there and a time, and that slows the growth for the industry. So when we look at graduates within Ireland by course area, what I've presented here shows that we've had a growth in bold, software applications development and analysis. You'll see that we've seen a growth from 25% of the share to 33%, but the more general courses not seeing the same growth, and in fact, some of them seeing a decline in the share, but overall growth in total numbers. When we look at the UK graduates by course area, unfortunately, the disciplines are slightly different given how the data is held by HISA. Again, I want to focus on artificial intelligence and the growth here from 1% to 11%, and in gaming from 3% to 13%, and a drop in the courses such as computer science from 67 down to 52% as total share. So my conclusions then from our research to date looking at Ireland and the UK is firstly to present this as a novel methodology, so using current job advertisement data to really describe the nature of the current employment market, not only in blockchain, but also in emerging technologies. It's going to provide, this information will provide a basis to forecast future demand and potential skill gaps. And CLAV's next presentation covers this specifically for Europe. Unfortunately, we use CDFOP forecasts that are not available for the UK, so we were not able to do this for the UK, but we're looking into alternative routes to do that. The current skill requirements for blockchain workers, so they are really heavily concentrated in ICT and computer science, and there's a mix of technical, business, and transversal skills required. The vast majority of emerging blockchain jobs, again, I said are classified across 3 occupational groups. So that's software application developers and analysts, ICT service managers, and business service and administration managers. So it appears that key roles for now and into the future are blockchain developers, architects, and managers. So as blockchain demand grows and filters out into different sectors and industries, the lack of skills-specific training in ICT graduate populations could act as a constraint on growth, and also opportunities for individuals with key skills and knowledge to upskill and reskill in this. The more of those that are available, the more likely it is to not act as a constraint on growth. So what's next then? We have forecasted the demand and supply for blockchain jobs by country for the EU, and CLAV's is going to present the information and more details on that. We've used the European labour force surveys and also standard CDFOP occupational forecasting approaches for that. And we also want to examine the determinants of cross-country variations in blockchain-related employment. So if we know what the blockchain-related employment occupations are, we can look at how these change across countries, across time, and look at what are the key factors driving the growth of these individuals working in these areas. So we want to do that within a panel estimation framework, and that is ongoing. So the CHAISE project is a 4-year project, and we're presenting the outcomes from the first year now, and we will have more as the years develop. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Adele. Very much enjoy that. And it's like I think I mentioned with Dionysios' presentation, okay, so thoughts are coming into my head and memories. And actually some of the questions that are already coming up in the Q&A function are kind of reflecting this a little bit. And it goes to this question of the extent to which there's a private sector role here versus a state role. Okay, in terms of sort of filling these skill gaps. Now we'll come back to that, and we'll have a longer discussion about it, I'm guessing. But it's always fascinating when economists do this sort of projection of supply and demand. And you know, there's very good reasons we do it in skills. There's a whole range of areas we don't do it. We just sort of assume the market will deal with these sort of things. But as I said, I think we can fill out that discussion a little bit later on. Actually, I'm just realizing here I was speaking to you there, Adele, without having my camera on, so apologies if that was strange. Okay, so let's move on to the next presentation, and great pleasure for me to welcome Klaus Cypricus, another one of our ESRI colleagues, and Klaus is going to talk about demand and supply of blockchain skills in Europe. So over to you, Klaus.
So thank you very much for welcoming me, and thank you everybody for coming in and experiencing this kind of unique area of research in looking at blockchain skills. Right now, what we know and what we're about to learn about in the future about blockchain and its development of the whole area. So today I'm going to present to you part of the CHAISE project, Blockchain Skills for Europe, area on demand and supply of blockchain skills in Europe, and more specifically focusing on the forecasting of skills over the next 5 to 6 years. So this presentation is going to echo the previous presentations from Dionysios and Adele, but delve into more detail on the forecasting method as well as the results to give us a more accurate or more in-depth information on those areas. So first of all, briefly on blockchain skills, demand and supply. We already know that the blockchain intensive industries are ICT, financial services and gaming. And we know that most recruiters would be blockchain service providers. The jobs that are being offered and that are currently being occupied are in the following occupations. There will be blockchain developers, blockchain engineers, and blockchain managers, and roughly even spread of these across all blockchain jobs. In terms of characteristics of typical blockchain employees, we know that this is unfortunately a male-dominated area with approximately 20% of the area being only occupied by women. This extends to the STEM field overall as well, but it's still reflected in the blockchain area. We know that the workforce here is young, with average age just under 35, and that most employees here hold a postgraduate education degree. However, what employers want is not only academic qualifications, but they actually put more emphasis on the professional skills and labor market experience, with a focus on technical skills, business skills, and transversal skills, as Adele and Dionysios have presented to you in more detail before. From the blockchain skills supply, so this is the educators, the ENT, education and training provision providers. So there are currently a small number of vocational education and training and tertiary programs and courses in blockchain. So as a result, companies experience difficulties of recruiting qualified staff. So what we find is that the current blockchain vacancies far outstrip the vacancies of the other EU jobs that are on average. As a result, these companies rely on internal training and e-learning programs. So what companies tend to do is take in persons with ICT backgrounds or computer science backgrounds and train them internally or put them in appropriate course to train them in blockchain. However, this informal education may not be enough to educate and train blockchain experts. As a result, formal education providers need to work with the industry to follow the latest trends and to implement appropriate blockchain teaching in the courses and modules. On blockchain skills forecasting, and here ESRI played a significant role in this CHAISE project and this work package of CHAISE project. And I'm going to present to you here the methods as well as the results of our latest findings for the year 2021/2022. First of all, the aim of this, the forecasting of blockchain skills, is to set up a collaborative model for the anticipation of future blockchain skills demand and supply, to act as an early warning information mechanism to mitigate possible labor market imbalances, and to support E&T and labor market actors in making evidence-based decisions. In developing the CHAISE forecasting model, which is going to be an overview of the methodology on our forecasting, on forecasting skills demand, we apply an innovative method that links demand for blockchain skills to already established occupational frameworks. This is because there's very little known about the blockchain occupations to date. So we follow the already established trends in occupational frameworks. The data for this comes, on the demand for blockchain skills comes from blockchain related jobs advertised on LinkedIn, which are then linked automatically to specific occupational categories and verified manually by the CHAISE consortium to get the most robust or the most accurate outcomes that we have. As Adele previously has mentioned, the following 5 occupations contain approximately 80% of all blockchain related jobs, and these are software developers, database network professionals, ICT service managers, business service and administration managers, and legal professionals. And in terms of blockchain forecasting methodology, we build on CDFOP's occupational forecasts and incorporate European labor force surveys for each of our European countries to improve the accuracy of those results. In terms of forecasting blockchain skills supply, we utilize graduate information from blockchain related and, where possible, blockchain specific higher education courses across Europe. So here we estimate the proportion of blockchain graduates from total graduates in blockchain-related fields of study, such as ICT. And we forecast ICT graduates from 2020 to 2026 for each of our European member states, using linear trends sourced from the previous 5 years, so 2015 to 2019 data. Some of our CHAISE partners also supplied estimates of blockchain-specific graduates, which enable us to estimate the blockchain-specific share of total ICT graduates, which is approximately 1.5%. So we know that at the moment the share of blockchain-specific graduates ranges between 0.6% to 2. In countries like Ireland and France, to approximately 2.5% in Slovenia, and so approximately an average of this would be a 1.5%, which would be a reasonable or as accurate as you can get an estimate of a blockchain-specific graduate from the ICT field or from the ICT area of study. So it's important to note about this specific methodology that it is a fully dynamic methodology. So when this process is going to be regenerated on an annual basis, so these forecasts will be conducted for another 3 years, changes in occupational categories, prediction, and any kind of other predictions will allow us to capture changes over time in blockchain skills demand and supply. And changes to data gathering techniques and graduate information can also be considered in the following forecasting periods if necessary. In terms of forecasting results, what we find is in terms of so before jumping into the actual forecasting results, let's look at the distribution of blockchain jobs by occupational categories. And again, Adele briefly mentioned this before, so I won't spend too much time on it. But we do find that the most of blockchain jobs that are being advertised fall into the software and application developer analyst occupational category. Another significant proportion in Ireland and the UK fall into business service and administration manager occupations, as well as ICT and ICT service manager positions. And for Ireland specifically, database and network professional occupation also contains a lot of, also seeks a lot of blockchain related workers. In terms of proportions of jobs in each ISCO category that are a blockchain job. So what we want to know is, okay, what proportion of software and application developers and analysts are actually blockchain specific workers. So what we find is that approximately, or I should say less than 10% of each of our key occupational categories contain blockchain related jobs. So you can see legal professionals here is at the lowest at 1.1% in Ireland, and the other EU 26 countries relate to blockchain related work. Well, the highest in Ireland would be database and network professionals at 9.4%. Well, in Europe overall, it would be business service and administration managers, where 9.4% of those of that occupation is employed or sought after by blockchain workers. In terms of forecasting blockchain skills demand, so what we have here is our 5 occupational categories. We have our software and application developer, analysts, database network professionals, ICT managers, business service and admin managers, legal professionals. And we also have this other ISCO category, which contains blockchain related jobs that we could map to specific occupations, but those occupations contain such a relatively insignificant amount of blockchain workers that it's easier to put them all together and represent them as an other ISCO category, but they are still a valuable input in our forecasting results and are incorporated in our forecasting results. So here what we have is, for each of our occupations, we find a total demand, which has been derived from CDFOC forecasts, as well as adjusted for proportions based on European labor force surveys. And next to that, we have our blockchain demand within each of those occupations, which is derived from a previous slide looking at the proportions of blockchain workers in specific occupations. So when we look at the very last column there, total forecast additional blockchain jobs between 2021 to 2026, so over that 5-year period, this is just over 28,000. When we look at the individual occupations, we can see that the majority of that forecasted job growth will come from the software and application developer and analyst occupation. And another significant portion is business and service managers, followed by the database and network professionals and ICT and managers. So this is a total European forecasted job growth / demand for blockchain skills. While for Ireland, and here's a bullet point just underneath the table, we forecast blockchain jobs in Ireland at 846 over the next 5-year period. In terms of the blockchain skills supply, when looking at the graduates related to blockchain skills, we look at the ICT graduates. So we're looking at ICT graduates. So here's an example, it's Ireland, but we've done it for every single European member state as well, between 2015 to 2019, and we see a gradual growth in the ICT graduates across that period. We use that data to apply linear trends to estimate to forecast or anticipate the ICT and blockchain graduates between 2020 to 2026, right? So for Ireland and the EU, we can see here the total forecasted ICT graduates will be approximately 60,000, just under 60,000 in Ireland, and over 1.1 million in Europe overall. We know that for Ireland, approximately 0.65% of all ICT graduates will be blockchain specific graduates. So this means that we forecast approximately 390 new blockchain specific graduates in Ireland, while for Europe, we apply country specific estimates of blockchain related occupations and also the averages for countries for which we don't have specific data, and we derive or we arrive at a value of just under 15,000 forecasted blockchain graduates over the next 6-year period, 5 to 6 year period. So what's important here is not only to look at the full numbers, but also to look at a comparison between the blockchain demand and supply. So we have in this table here, we have our total blockchain demand, and right next to that, we have our blockchain graduate demand. So how we derive this is when scraping the LinkedIn jobs for occupation, for jobs that relate to blockchain, we find that these jobs are advertised at an entry level or for new entrants or at a graduate level in approximately 43% of cases in Ireland and just under 50% of cases in Europe overall. And therefore, blockchain graduate demand for Ireland is approximately 371, and EU overall is just under 13,000. We already know that ICT graduate supply is over 52,000 in Ireland and over 1.1 million in Europe overall, and our graduate supply is 390 in Ireland and just under 15,000 in Europe. So when we look at the comparison between blockchain graduate demand and blockchain graduate supply here, we can see that these numbers are, for Europe overall and Ireland, are relatively similar, right? They're not out of proportion from each other. So this means that any kind of demand for blockchain skills is likely to be satisfied by blockchain graduate supply. Now, this data does vary by country, but the differences are not very stark or significant. So here I will show you briefly and quickly going through these for different regions across Europe to look at the blockchain demand, the graduate demand and graduate supply, just to show you what we see for all the other countries. So for example, in the European or in the Eastern European region, the biggest outlier you might think here is Poland with significantly more greater blockchain demand and graduate supply. Well, this is mainly due because Poland is a large country in terms of population. So there would be a greater demand there as well as supply. And we can see that even for Poland, the graduate demand and supply are relatively similar. For Lithuania and Slovakia, the graduate demand and graduate supply are also similar. But for countries like Bulgaria, Romania, and Slovenia, we estimate that there will be a significantly greater supply of blockchain graduates then there will be demand for blockchain skills. In peripheral EU countries, we know already for Ireland, the graduate demand and graduate supply is approximately similar. While for countries like Italy and Spain, we can see that there is a greater blockchain graduate demand. While for country like for Greece, for example, there's a significant surplus of blockchain skills, where the graduates, blockchain-specific graduates, are anticipated to exceed the demand for blockchain skills. In central EU countries, we see that for Belgium, demand and supply are approximately equal, while for France, the graduate demand is greatly exceeds the graduate supply, while the opposite is the case in the opposite is the case in Germany, where there's actually we forecast a greater supply of blockchain graduates. Now, for Germany, we also note that there's going to be a reduction in job growth in business service and administration area overall, and therefore the demand for blockchain graduates will also be lower, and that's why we see this kind of stark disparity in the German data. And finally, for the Northern European region, we can see that for countries like Denmark and Sweden, the blockchain graduate demand exceeds the blockchain graduate supply. And for Finland and Netherlands, the blockchain graduate supply exceeds the blockchain graduate demand. Now, what's interesting for Netherlands here is these minus figures here, and this is due to the fact that the CD4 forecast suggests that the business service and administration manager occupation overall is going to there's going to be less jobs in that area overall in Netherlands. As a result, it drives down the blockchain demand as well in that specific country. With the blockchain forecasting, we also conducted intelligence gathering activities in which our CHAISE consortium was heavily involved. So our forecasts of blockchain skills demand and supply are accompanied by detailed examination of current and future blockchain sectoral development trends, training and education provision, societal, economic, and labor market developments. And along with this, we also surveyed approximately 120 stakeholders and interviewed 56 international experts to validate our forecasting results and to provide feedback on our approach. So briefly on validation of the forecasting results that I have just presented to you, The majority of our survey respondents agree that blockchain-related jobs are accurately mapped to ISCO categories, that LinkedIn is the most appropriate source of related jobs data at this moment, although there are many other ways of gaining this data. New graduates with blockchain skills will come from the ICT and computer science fields of study as well. Approximately 50% of survey respondents were satisfied with forecasting results, while 36% thought that they were too low and 14% thought that they're too high. So there's a mix of opinion in this area, but the in-depth interviews highlight some of the key justifications for these disparities. So what we find is that the blockchain sector is still developing and changing. So there may be additional sector-specific skills needs in the near future. The demand forecasts are also appear conservative to the interviewees due to the rapid expansion of the sector. So it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in over the next year or even in 5 years, with all the different kinds of jobs coming, being created, and therefore the need for those skills will be more significant. And finally, the lack of blockchain-specific courses across Europe means that it's difficult to forecast the number of blockchain skills supply accurately, but we have done our very best job that we can with the data, with the limited data that is given to us. But this will improve as we go, as we conduct further forecasting over the next 3 years. In terms of analysis of blockchain labor market, I won't spend too much time on this, but there are some important technical skills, business skills, and transversal skills that have been highlighted by Dionysios and Adele earlier. And employers are looking for a combination of technical and non-technical skills in a blockchain workforce that are necessary in the area. In terms of sectoral development trends, we find so our CHAISE consortium partners find that blockchain technology is used and growing in almost every EU country, and that regulation can accelerate adoption of the blockchain technology, and that strong European ecosystem around blockchain continues to bring together all stakeholders. But the main challenges for the sector that need to be cleared up to advance this sector is to consider lack of standardization, privacy and security risks, crime and misconceptions about the technology. And finally, in terms of trends in education and training provision, our CHAISE consortium finds there's a growing demand for blockchain skills from educators and job market, which is largely driven by the jobs market. In order to satisfy this demand for these blockchain skills, seminars and modules of blockchain technology are offered to meet this demand. But the area is changing fast with noticeable changes, and therefore the curriculars need to be adjusted or adopted quickly to respond to the growing blockchain sector. And teaching needs to focus on not only technical skills, but as well as business applicational aspects. And it is important to educate not only the developers of this blockchain technology, but also users of that technology in an industry setting. Finally, in my concluding remarks, I want to highlight that this is a novel dynamic methodological framework for forecasting blockchain demand and supply. Our forecasts are designed to be key input any national or EU level skills strategies designed to ensure the growth of the blockchain employment is not restricted as a consequence of skills mismatches, and that the results indicate that for blockchain workers, expressed as a proportion of new jobs, remains quite small in EU countries, which ranges between 0.25% in Sweden to 4.4% in Croatia. We know that 81% of our emerging blockchain jobs are concentrated in just 3 detailed occupational categories: our software and application developers, our ICT service managers, and our business and admin service managers. The demand for blockchain professionals is likely to remain modest over the 2020 to 2026 period, with highest rates of job growth predicted in France, Poland, Spain, Italy, Sweden, and Germany. And the gap between the demand for new blockchain graduates and the supply from university is not substantial in the vast majority of countries that we have seen. And if there is any the disparities of these may be mitigated by the free movement of workers or labor within Europe, or even nationally companies, as we know already from experience, can hire workers from ICT or computer science backgrounds to satisfy that demand for blockchain. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for listening. I hope that this gives you an insights into the future of the blockchain skills. And please follow us, and please follow the CHAISE project as well, with the reports coming out on a continuous basis. And we look forward to working with you perhaps in the near future. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Klaus. Fantastic presentation. So congratulations for that. And I know you'll stay with us on the panel. So we'll move to our final speaker, and this is Professor Joyce O'Connor. Now, Joyce is listed in the program as chair of the Education Skills and Innovation Working Group of Blockchain Ireland, which of course she is, and that's an important role. But of course, I have to confess, I'm very excited to hear about Joyce's contribution here, because as a lot of people on the call will know, she was a sort of a very much a leading figure actually in skills provision in Ireland through her leadership of the National College of Ireland. So absolutely delighted to have Joyce's input today. And again, another very old friend of the ESRI, Joyce, if I can say that. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you all today, and good morning to everybody else. I'm here, as Alan says, as chair of the Education Skills and Innovation Working Group, and members of our working group are Dr. Susan Ray, Carmel Summers, Saoirse Mulligan, Jonas Van Schmidt, John Hogan, Gavin Fitzgerald, and David Roach. And interestingly enough, they are a mix of people from industry in the SME and multinational sector, academic and training organizations, and civil society. But my presentation today will set out the 4 steps that we think need to be taken in order to develop Ireland as an international blockchain hub. And that international blockchain hub in the context of emerging technologies. Now, as a number of people have spoken of some of these areas, I'll just briefly say what the 4 steps are and take each one individually. The first one is creating awareness of the transformative power of blockchain. Second is to look at leadership in Europe and Ireland. Third is to look at the National Digital Skills Strategy Roadmap, creating talent for our future. And that is really about jobs. And finally, looking at coordination of existing infrastructure and resources at all levels by creating a national multi-institutional collaborative centre of excellence with the government, industry, academia, training organisations, and civil society. So if we're talking about creating awareness of the transformative power of blockchain technology, and other speakers have alluded to this, you know, when you talk to the general public, they don't know, but if they know anything about it, they associate it with crypto. And as we all know, blockchain technology is the platform on which crypto works. And another way of looking at it is, if you see blockchain technology as the train tracks, crypto technology or Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are like one of the carriages at the back of the train. And what we'd really like to look at is the transformative nature of this technology. Ask the question, what benefits can it bring to the economy, business, and society? And what I'd like to share with you today are 4 descriptions of companies that are doing exactly this in the financial inclusion, supply chain, sport, educational credentials, and another application for domestic violence. What's really fascinating, and William mentioned earlier that the whole ecosystem has grown from 50 to 150. These companies, these Irish companies, are world leaders and recognized as such. And I think by telling their stories, you will make people aware of the unique kind of impact blockchain technology can have on particular areas. Now, ATech is about financial inclusion. They provide digital identity for refugees. They were the first in the world to do this with Syrian refugees in 2015. They're a for-profit company, but have incorporated the UN Sustainable Development Goals as part of their business plan. And it uses digital identity as a gateway to building financial inclusion and promoting equitable economic prosperity. So if you look at development aid as an example, their platform brings transparency, traceability, and is used by governments, NGOs, corporates, and charities worldwide. There's lots of examples I could give. I'm just going to give you one more because I think it really shows the capacity of what they're doing. ATEC have worked with Palmer Access to improve maternal care in Tanzania by providing a blockchain platform to register mother and children's births, targeting the UN SDG goal to end preventable deaths of newborn children. It's not just me saying that they're exceptional. They have received, among many rewards, they've received awards from the IMF, the UN, the French government, and IBM. Now, the next companies I'd like to look at are supply chain. And I'm going to look initially at downstream craft beer. And they were the world's first blockchain craft beer. Now, I'm sorry to say today, and on this occasion, there isn't one for everyone in the audience, but perhaps on another occasion. But using a QR code on the beer can, you can find out everything you need to know about this beer from barley to can or bottle. Blackwater Distillery work on whiskey, obviously gin and vodka. And remember, whiskey, the key issue with whiskey is actually fraud. And this is a multi-billion industry worldwide. Moya Coffee, a lot of people will have know this group and may not know that you can use a QR code also on their coffee bags so consumers can see exactly who got paid what for the coffee. So it's 100% fair trade, but also 100% fair chain. Let's look at another one now, sport and the horse racing industry. You know, the horse racing is the second biggest spectator sport in Ireland. And there are 52 countries that horse racing takes place in. So it's a massive market. So if you want to buy the leg of a horse or any part of the horse, Equidec, based in Cork, use blockchain technology to make owning a fraction of a horse more accessible to the wider public. Horse syndication and a horse industry solution is what they're about, and they generate, sell, and manage digital assets in the equine industry. If we move now to an area close to my heart, and I know a lot of the audience that are here, to learning credentials, EdQ, the Institute of Banking with AIB, Bank of Ireland, Ulster Bank, and Deloitte created a learning credential platform as an unalterable, trusted store of education qualifications, regulatory and compliance, and continuing professional development records. This is highly scalable and I think offers a really exciting opportunity for the higher education sector here as a credentialing platform, as well as being of interest to other professional bodies, for example, the Law Society. Now I'm going to now mention HeHop. And HeHop are a French company based in Paris, and they have an app using blockchain technology that captures and stores legally valid evidence of violence and abuse, including audio, photographs, and video files. These can be used as evidence that leads to the prosecution of offenders. And I think their app is an example of how it was developed. It was developed obviously with the judiciary, with the police system, with stakeholders, with the public, and an example that if you want to get things done in this area, you have to work collaboratively. And some people may be skeptical and say, that'll never work here. You won't be able to submit this as evidence in court. But let's remind ourselves that email was not allowed to be submitted in court a number of years ago. So what action should be taken? You see these wonderful stories, open up people's minds, makes blockchain exciting. I believe we should have a national communication plan between government, state, semi-state bodies, and of course the private sector. Alan mentioned that mix, how do you work together? I think it's absolutely critical that this plan is developed together. And I can give you some examples from our own working committee. Blockdaemon and Jonas, who Blockdaemon is based in Galway. They have an in-house university. They have an awareness program for all their employers or all their employees, their customers, and are now considering meetups for the public in Galway. MTU, Dr. Susan Ray, she's creating with colleagues an awareness program for students, faculty, and people working together in Munster Technological University, which will start in September. And Block W has worked with the Institute of Banking to create micro-learning modules in a library for all their professions to look at applications of blockchain, as we've worked also, Block W have worked also with the ICS Computing Society, working with ICT professionals in that area. And I know Technology Ireland ICT SkillsNet has also provided a range of programs other than the master's programs. But I would remind people, and I just as a novel idea perhaps, you know, crypto.com produced a video with Matt Damon for 3 minutes on crypto. Why not use our Paul Mescal for some similar video, but on blockchain technology? It would capture people's minds, see what the possibilities are. Now, the next slide I'd like to look is about leadership. As we know, leadership is so important, and Europe, and all the speakers have spoken about that, have given leadership in terms of the EU agenda, which is really about digital and green, those dual transformers in terms of digital transformation. And as has been said, Europe has identified blockchain as a key technology, and they want us in Europe to be leaders in this area. They've created a blockchain strategy, an infrastructure, use cases, a sandbox, a regulatory framework, investments, and as you can see, all the work done on skills and jobs. But within that infrastructure, there's a European blockchain services infrastructure, and it has asked the 27 member states to join. 17 members have joined. We're not one of those. And that's one of the areas we'd like people to make policymakers to make a decision on, that we join that. Now, the National Digital Strategy, I think, is an excellent document, very clearly laid out what the actions need to be done. But if you're identifying emerging technologies, blockchain technology gets 2 mentions in that. And I think it would be really important to create a stakeholder map on who's involved in digital. We could see William there at Beausang in his presentation, very interested and passionate about what he's doing. But there's 11 departments, 4 ministers that have responsibility for different aspects of the digital agenda. So what we'd like to see is that all departments embrace emerging technologies, including blockchain, and a decision to clarify a lead coordinator, a minister across all departments, and ask for that specific link to the European blockchain skills infrastructure. Now, William has alluded to this, and he's working on that national digital strategy within the context of a very strong European agenda. We have EU national coordinators on skills, digital skills and job platform. And of course, we've heard the amazing treasury of data and forecasting that the ESRI and the EU CHAISE project has done. And as has been said, this tells us about the supply and demand of blockchain skills, but also that mismatch between educational providers, the training provision, and also the private sector and what needs to be done. So we need more flexible delivery. And I think that can be done through this National Skills Roadmap in terms of bringing people together, as William has suggested, in educational institutions. So this would be part of our national digital roadmap. And my final point is, and I think that William alluded to it in terms of education, but I think we need to coordinate existing infrastructure and resources. We've enormous expertise around the country at all levels, and we need to bring it all together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. We've all the pieces on the table. We can see the standout projects, we can see what's happening, but that needs to be brought together in this national multi-institution collaborative centre of excellence. So we'd really encourage that these 4 steps are taken now. Every one of those steps, whether it's awareness raising, the leadership on specific points, the roadmap we know is in place and is being set up as we speak, and the coordination of existing infrastructure and resources. In doing this, we can look to the future, to jobs for the future, upskilling of people in the digital transformation, and together we can shape the future. Thank you very much for listening.
So much, Joyce. I think I said at the outset this morning that I was hoping to learn. So I have to say, it's that old teaching method. There's nothing like good examples to illustrate the point. So your slide there about the range of companies that are using this, I have to say that was really informative to me. And of course, your subsequent points were very, very stimulating as well. Look, we have about 15 minutes for questions. So I'm going to ask whoever wants of the sort of earlier speakers if they want to turn the cameras on so we can kind of have an interaction. So is that going to be possible, folks? Brilliant. And as I look across the screen, I think the only person who hasn't spoken so far is Seamus. So you're not going to get away that lightly, Seamus. I'm going to put a question to you, if that's okay. And I would like to start. I sort of touched on this earlier on, the question of the role of the private sector, and Joyce picked it up to a certain degree, but I would like it sort of explored just a little bit more fully. And I suppose my question is that, when you look at the results from the forecasting model, and there's the supply and the demand, and there seems to be a shortfall. I mean, I guess the fundamental question then is, okay, so whose role is it to fill that shortfall? And is there an underlying assumption here that it's a state sort of responsibility to do that? It probably is partly, but what is the role for the private sector here? And is there a sense, to sort of draw this out a bit, well, the way we often think of the private sector as being more agile and more like, I think Seamus has actually dropped off the call, so somebody else is going to have to take this question. Can it be the case that the private sector is a bit more agile and so better placed to really sort of reflect these differences in supply and demand? So there's kind of a range of themes there. So I don't know, Dionysios, would you like to take a stab at that at all from your overarching perspective?
Actually, as always, the private sector is much more agile rather than the public sector. So,
apologies.
Sorry?
Apologies, I got froze out. I'm back. So.
Yeah, I had assumed I had frightened you off the question, Seamus, but we'll pick you up in a second. But back to you, Dionysios.
So what I was saying is that, as always, the private sector is much more agile than the public one. But when we talk about the private sector, it means that the training offerings, the reskilling programs that are currently available within own premises as part of in-house training are mostly directed to the existing ICT professional. As we all know, the computing landscape is constantly evolving. New disruptive technologies emerge, and these technologies gradually get applied in different instances. It's necessary for ICT professionals to keep pace with this development, and the private sector has an active role in this. At the same time, however, public educational systems need to create a new pool of potential employees. This should come through public education. And that's why we aim to create a new qualification that can be applied in all countries, adjusted to the realities of each national educational system. So we need a mixed approach, efforts from both the private sector and the public sector as well. So I think that the alliance, the CHAISE Alliance, brings together private actors, leading industry companies, but also public authorities to join efforts and create an industry validated qualification that will best serve both reskilling but also initial educational needs.
Great. Thanks, Ron. I will come to you now, Seamus. So I don't know if you got the totality of my question, but that idea.
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, so I was basically picking up on this idea that if the modeling identifies this gap between the demand on the one side and supply on the other, the role of the private sector, okay, in terms of sort of filling that gap. I was linking that's, you know, these are all very old notions, so I know they'd be familiar arguments. The extent to which, you know, the private sector might be more agile in identifying the skills gaps. And then the last point I will add, because it comes up in the questions and answers that are being submitted, the danger that particular technologies can kind of go out of fashion. Okay, and always the worry that you might have, and I know I'm sort of characterizing things, but a sort of a clunky state-led approach to this, which may not sort of see the moving trend. So a fair mix of theirs, Seamus, but your reflections broadly on that sort of public sector, private sector interaction.
Well, the first thing to say that while occupational forecasting, which we're effectively doing here, only gives you a sort of an idea of the relativities between, you know, the demand for labor and the supply for labor, and also the distribution of that across occupations. And I've always argued that occupational forecasting just done in isolation is actually pretty useless, that you need to be consulting with firms and with employers to get a sense of, okay, we've got an idea of the magnitude of what courses we need, but what is actually the curriculum and the skill sets that need to go into them? Because if you don't have that and you're developing programs and just renaming them, for instance, blockchain, but not developing curriculum to the needs of the labor market and employers, then the whole thing becomes pretty pointless. So you need the constant engagement with employers in order to sort of populate what these courses should actually look like that are there in order to service the demand side. Otherwise, it's pointless. In terms of things going out of date and technologies going out of date, that's again points to the problem of, I suppose, traditional occupational forecasting, which is ran just, you know, every 5 years, and then we just accept that that's the scenario, nothing changes. With these emerging technologies, you just can't do that. So when we look at what blockchain looked like in November 2021, it may look very different in terms of where it's distributed across occupations in 2022, and it may have grown substantially, and the forecasting methodologies can go out of date very, very rapidly. And that's why we have tried to develop a dynamic approach to forecasting. We're saying, look, this is the situation now, but with emerging technologies, the situation next year could look very different. So we apply that scraping methodology to see where the jobs are again. Have they changed in terms of either their magnitude or in terms of how they're distributed across occupations? Does that vary across countries? And then we can re-input that into the forecasting methodologies from setting up and put that forward. And also the terminology. Someone's asked the question, well, do you just search on blockchain? Well, for the time being, that's the only term that we look at in terms of job titles and job descriptions. But next year, the terminology associated with the professions and the occupations can change, and another key set of terms can go in to the job search methodology and the scraping methodology. So that everything's changing, everything's dynamic. But I think we have a methodology that sort of stands up to that and allows us to sort of recalibrate things very, very quickly in a very, very changing and dynamic labour market.
Sure, thanks for that. If other members of the panel want to make a contribution at any of these points, maybe just raise their hand. I don't want to put people on the spot, but if people want to contribute, they're more than welcome to do so. I should say, James, just in response to your reference to talking to employers, will be slightly confessional from an ESRI point. But for a very long time, the economists only dealt with data and they didn't really talk to too many people. My feeling on this has evolved over time, partly listening to our sociological colleagues who always talk to the value of actually talking to people. And it's good to see that approach is now filtering into the labour economics team, that it is actually a really good idea to talk to people and to hear how things are evolving. Joyce, can I ask you, you did make reference in your talk though to one of the companies where they had, I think you almost described it as an internal university.
Yes.
This idea. So is your experience here that again, private sector employers are intensively training and, sort of fulfilling that role?
Yeah, in actual fact, it's not just the training, it's creating awareness amongst their employees about blockchain and what it is. It is an emerging technology. And of course, I should have said, they're doing it in association with the Atlantic Technological University. And I think it's a good example where this is a short-term course. It's 6 weeks, it's an hour a week. This is creating awareness. You'd say it's a first level of education, but that dynamic relationship between the university and the company. And I think Seamus has alluded to that. It has to be a collaborative thing between industry, the community and government. But I would say about government that government gives credibility to areas, skills areas and skill developments. They put funding towards it. So that's really important as well. And they will be guided, if you like, by industry. But that mix of industry, academia, training organizations and government is critically important. I don't think today we can say one is doing this, one is doing that. We must work together collaboratively, because the real issue is if skills are short in the general population, skills are also short in the industry or in the universities and training organizations. So we must really work together and bring these people in, as we suggest, this national multi-institutional center of excellence.
And actually, just as if I could put another question to you, Joyce, because as I was motivating my remarks, I was kind of doing this characterization of the agile private sector and the clunky public sector. Okay, now it is a characterization, but when you mention the Atlantic Technological University, I mean, it does sort of strike me that our colleges are probably more agile than they previously were. And I just wonder, would you like to reflect on that for a moment or two? Partly, again, coming from your previous experience, but I come from the traditional university user, which is I did a 4-year degree and then I did a 2-year, and I think, again, the offerings are quite different now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that combination of the linkages between, and I think organizations like SkillsNet play a very important role as well, because they, bring the industry together, introduce them to academic partners. But you will see all people in this area that I've met are really interested in collaboration, doing courses, and they are short courses, they're micro-credential courses. So there's a place for the 4-year undergraduate, 2-year masters, maybe another 4 years of PhD. But nowadays that flexibility is really important. And even some of our colleagues like Susan Ray in MTU, they find it difficult to get blockchain specialists at a level. So they often have to train them in-house, as did Blockdaemon. So the story is about continuous training, upgrading of skills, which we'll all have to do. And we all talk about lifelong learning. That's here to stay. And that means we must be flexible. We must make it easy for people to access courses at a time and place that suits them.
And William, I don't put you on the spot, but do you want to comment on the evolving nature of the third level colleges, and becoming more agile, and actually possibly even more importantly, I mean, we always talk about further education and higher education as some sort of split, but this strikes me as another one of those cases where really, the two merge, really, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I was hoping you wouldn't be putting me on the spot with your characterization as a clunky public service, and then the nimble.
But you're excluded.
You're different. You're different.
The highly agile.
Speaking as a career public servant, but I mean, there's no doubt that there's a real tendency evident in tertiary, in higher education, to be more flexible and be more responsive. You mentioned the 4-year degree program. It's very dominant in terms of school leavers moving into higher education. And I suppose part of the change, and apprenticeship is part of the picture, is to move to models that probably are more aligned with, helping people to find a kind of trajectory, a vocational, professional trajectory, maybe at an earlier point in their sort of experience of higher education. But I mean, the point that I'd be keen to make is, I mean, we can sort of, run a thought experiment building on, what's already kind of evident in the system about having a supply side that is very agile, very responsive. And you'll see examples of that across the board. And Joyce has spoken about some of them. And of course, National College of Ireland, that was their signature. But the kind of the challenge that pops up is the demand. I mean, we've ICT programs, and we all have the numbers in terms of the level of demand that's there and the opportunities that are there. A lot of those courses are not fully subscribed. I mean, the whole challenge of getting people involved in STEM, getting women involved in STEM, and young women, girls in school, and it's that sort of issue. It plays out well, actually. Just to use a brief example, the EU are currently finalising, European Commission with member states are currently finalising a recommendation, which is non-binding, but on individual learning accounts. And the kind of the reason for that, and nobody is saying, and the way that it's phrased, it's not seen as a panacea for a lifelong learning challenge, but it's a sort of so it's canary in the coal mine, that you can continue to work and focus in on the supply side, but unless there's a demand that's forthcoming and there's a kind of an deeper understanding and awareness of that need that Joyce has talked about for work, a stronger engagement by everyone in the workforce with the reskilling and upskilling agenda and lifelong learning. The structural change that we see across the workforce, is going to be a bigger challenge for us. So it's sort of interesting to see at European level and awareness, and obviously it percolates through to ourselves, that there is there's something new required to underpin more of a step change in our response to lifelong learning. And I mean, a focus on the institutions, higher education and FET, as you talk about, really important, and working with them to be more agile, more responsive, working with industry all the time. That's a key piece, as several people have said. But the demand issue is what kind of worries me.
And just staying with the demand issue, and Adele, I'm going to put you on the spot now, and the reason I'm going to do that, I think you're more qualified than most to talk a little bit about secondary schools. But I think what's really interesting about this is other ESRI research has shown, the stuff's coming out of the Growing Up in Ireland data, that parents do still have a significant influence over the choices that kids make when they're going on to college, particularly mothers. Okay, it's one of those interesting things. It's quite a traditional view, but it still seems to show up in the data. And other ESRI work also talks about the importance of career guidance teachers. And I'm just sort of thinking about the parents of Ireland and the career guidance teachers of Ireland who may not be logged on today to learn all about what blockchain is. And I'm just wondering, is there sort of a gap there at second level that we need to think about in terms of that demand issue that William is kind of posing?
Yes, I agree, Alan, and that has come up in other conferences that we've attended around this area, that exposure is very important at the ages of between 8 and 15. So whether that is in the home environment or in the school environment, it's very important. So coding and computer literacy is very important. And we haven't looked at that as part of the study at all, because we very much are focused on what are the jobs that are advertised now, what are the skills that they are looking for. And we are looking to further in higher education to provide that. But of course, we need individuals, as William has said, that are looking towards STEM and those courses. And there's a certain base level of knowledge that is required. And in fact, some studies have shown that it's actually math. So if students opt out of math and engagement with math, they are opting out of computer science and ICT also. So the importance of the maths teacher in that environment, I think, is very important. And as you said, career guidance is also an issue, and more resources need to be directed to that to help students to make better choices. And role models, so that students have more than what they see within their own family environment, and have role models, and they understand what these occupations are. So there is that mix of exposure and a basic level of understanding to give a taster that allows people to be more specialized. So it's offering these range of courses to younger students and older students.
Thanks for that. Joyce, you wanted to make a
just to add to a little bit to what Adele is saying. I think, you know, when we're talking about educational choices, you're absolutely right. It is mothers, it is parents, but we never target like the National Parents Organization. I should think that when we're looking about this, and this is why we, you know, when I talked about the civil society, I think you have to include those in it. And it's very interesting, you know, through the AI strategy, they have an ambassador, Dr. Patricia Scanlon, which is great. And they're going to have a National Youth Forum in September. And what would be great, not just to talk about AI, but to talk about emerging technologies, give examples, as Adele has said, really great examples of people that it's not just about technology, it's about you making an impact on society, making an impact on business, and just to open their minds to the possibilities of technology and these emerging technology, because things are not going to be the same. I suppose change is with us, and this is a real example of digital transformation in action.
No, all very good points, and I'm again reminded of your Paul Mescal comment as well.
Yes,
Joyce,
it's a great idea.
It's a great. Well, actually, I've heard it proposed for many years. You know, the ongoing mystery of Irish education is why people still don't like doing the Irish language. And I've always thought that we need to find the most attractive human being in the world to advertise the joys of speaking Irish. So maybe Paul Mescal can do that one as well.
He's done a lot for the GAA, Alan. So
absolutely. Listen, we're up against our noon deadline, and always sort of conscious that people have busy lives, don't like holding people for too long. So it's been a terrific morning. Again, I know I said at the outset I was looking to learn. I've learned a huge amount. So I'm very grateful to all the speakers. So again, Dionysios, thank you so much for coming along and give us the European perspective. William, thank you to you for coming along, giving the department perspective. And again, Joyce, great to see you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. You know, the issues and the discussions keep going. So congratulations to my ESRI colleagues too for fantastic presentations, and obviously for the quality of the work. So we no doubt we'll be hearing more. It's good to hear that the project will keep rolling on. The results will keep coming through, and as I said, hopefully we can return to these issues before too long. So again, with that, I'll just wish everybody a good morning or good afternoon. Okay, bye-bye.